Hello and welcome to a new episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. I'm Raham Morsi, and if you're watching the show for the very first time, let me reintroduce you to what the show is all about. The show is composed of a number of different segments. First, we take a closer look at the world of politics. Next comes business and finance. And then we learn more about what's happening in the world of technology, the latest cultural and arts events, and a closer look at the world of sports. We're going to start off with politics after the break. President El-Sisi received Mauritania's Minister of Cooperation and Foreign Affairs, Mohammed Salem Weld El-Marzouk, in Cairo on Sunday. The spokesman for the presidency, Councillor Ahmed Fahmy, said the Mauritanian minister delivered during the meeting a written message from Mauritania's president, Mohammed Weld El-Ghazouani. He said the message expressed appreciation to Cairo's role in the Arab and African arenas and keenness to boost bilateral ties between the two sides. He said the message also expressed keenness to benefit from the Egyptian development experience. He also said that for his part, the president conveyed a willingness to activate bilateral cooperation mechanisms in various domains. He said Cairo is ready to provide assistance to develop and upgrade the cadres in Mauritania in various fields. The spokesman said the meeting witnessed the exchange of points of view between the two sides and issues of regional concern as well as Arab action. The National Dialogue Committees discussed on Tuesday some issues of economic axes consisting of 8 subcommittees. The committees will hold 4 sessions regarding economic axis. 2 of them will be discussing current and social protection programs and new developments in this file. The 2 other sessions will discuss drafting a tourism maps for Egypt, meaning means of attraction, and motivating tourism investment in its shape. The first session of the National Dialogue will kick off on Sunday at the Cairo International Conference Center, and this had already kicked off on Sunday. It discussed some files of political axis. The Board of Trustees has agreed on holding sessions mainly on Sunday and Tuesday every week. And on last Sunday, General Coordinator of the National Dialogue, Diyar Rashwan, said the first session of the dialogue's political path was vastly constructive and unprecedented, encompassing a wide spectrum of political groups and parties with different points of view. His remarks came after the first political session of the National Dialogue kicked off on Sunday at the Cairo International Center for Conferences in Nasr City. The political axis of the dialogue discussed 5 subcommittees, namely the Practice of Political Rights Committee, Parliamentary Representation, Provincial Affairs, Political Parties, Human Rights and Public Freedoms, Syndicates and Civil Societies. To tell us more about the National Dialogue sessions, we're joined over the phone by Mr. Raouf Ghaffar, a political analyst. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening to you, my dear.
How did you read the session on Sunday when it came to the political dialogue and the different subcommittees that were created to discuss different issues and topics within the Egyptian society?
First of all, it's an excellent beginning. As explained by the president, we need this dialogue. We need to know what Egyptians think of what is happening to their country, what they hope for the future of their country. And it was well, in my opinion, divided into different topics and subjects. They start with politics, and then they go into others like economics, and what have you. So it was an excellent start. Subcommittees are very meaningful, and it's like task forces or workshops where everything will be discussed candidly. It will be discussed openly, and this is very healthy, because we need to
have open conversations. Yes.
Exactly. We need to hear a lot of opinions, even if some of them are not agreeing with what is happening, or they have suggestions other than the ones that are offered. They might be opposing some of the government's views. And this, again, results into more and more deep discussions and deliberations, leading to what really is needed for this country to go on and to overcome all the challenges it faces.
Sir, what are your expectations of the national dialogue? What do you expect to happen through these discussions when it comes, like you were saying, they're going to be discussing several topics, whether it be political or economic. What are the expectations for the outcomes when it comes to the dialogue?
We are very optimistic. We look forward to, I don't want to say a big change, I should say, in a lot of issues, a lot of files, and this is again in the direction of the new republic. We are now aiming to a new Egypt, and all what it takes to transform Egypt into this new era, I'm sure it will be discussed, and if needs be, will be done. And as I said, as long as it leads to more and more democracy, more and more importance to human opinions and human rights and what have you, I'm sure this will lead us to the future we aspire for, and whether it is on the political issues or on the economic issues or even on the humanitarian issues and internal issues and individual issues.
Okay, Mr. Oghafar, a political analyst, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. Moving to some regional news, hundreds of Sudanese and other nationalities crossed through the border crossing between Egypt and Sudan amid facilitations by all state authorities in Egypt in cooperation with civil society. Meanwhile, the Sudanese Foreign Ministry condemned the attacks by paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, against diplomatic missions in Sudan, breaching international norms. Here's the story.
Hundreds of Sudanese and other nationalities crossed through border crossings between Egypt and Sudan amid huge facilities by all state authorities in cooperation with civil society. Meanwhile, the Sudanese Foreign Ministry condemned the attack by RSF against diplomatic missions in Sudan, breaching international norms. The Foreign Ministry accused the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces of attacking headquarters of diplomatic missions of embassies of Jordan, South Sudan, Somalia, Uganda, and Defense Attaché Office of Saudi Arabia, in addition to Kuwait's Defense Attaché Office. Gulf Cooperation Council also condemned attacking the residence if head of military attaché of Kuwait's embassy in Khartoum and destroying it. The Council called on all parties in Sudan to take urgent and necessary measures to protect diplomats and diplomatic headquarters. Meanwhile, airstrikes and artillery fire intensified sharply across Sudan's capital early on Tuesday. Witnesses said airstrikes, explosions and clashes could be heard in the south of Khartoum, and there was heavy shelling across the river Nile in parts of the adjoining cities of Bahri and Omdurman. The fighting between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces caused a humanitarian crisis, displacing more than 700,000 people inside Sudan and forcing about 200,000 to flee into neighboring countries. Fighting has surged both in Khartoum and Janina, capital of West Darfur, since the two warring parties began talks in Jeddah brokered by Saudi Arabia and the United States more than a week ago.
Still on regional news, a Palestinian youth was injured by Israeli occupation gunfire during the storming in of a Uqba Jabr camp in Jericho Ariha in the West Bank. The occupation forces have abducted 19 Palestinians from various parts of the occupied West Bank, including 5 from Uqba Jabr camp. Occupation forces have been conducting near daily storming in operations at the camp for the past 2 months. Earlier in the week, the United States welcomed the Egyptian-brokered Palestinian-Israeli ceasefire agreement in Gaza, thanking President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi for diplomatic efforts to secure the halt. The United States welcomed the peace process and they thanked the President for his efforts. The United Nations said that more than 50 Palestinian homes were destroyed and around 950 people displaced in Israeli attacks in Gaza. Meanwhile, calm returned to Gaza Sunday as a fragile ceasefire ending 5 days of fighting held, leaving Palestinians and Israelis to count the costs of cross-border fire, which has killed dozens. Fishermen took to their boats in the coastal Palestinian enclave as Gazans emerged from sheltering in their homes during the fierce exchange of fire. The fighting broke out Tuesday with Israeli strikes on the Gaza Strip last week. It ceased late Saturday last week, following days of truce talks led by Egypt. As the skies fell silent, residents were left to mourn the 33 people killed in the Gaza Strip. After the ceasefire took effect, ambulances and fire trucks drove in convoy in Gaza, while more than 50 homes destroyed and around 950 people displaced, leaving 190 wounded. UN Middle East envoy Tor Wensland welcomed the truce and said he was deeply saddened by the loss of life and injuries. Yesterday, the UN commemorated Palestinian 1948 Nakba for the first time. This comes as the Israeli occupation forces killed a Palestinian man in an attack the northern West Bank city of Nablus 2 days after halting a blitz in Gaza that claimed the lives of 34 Palestinians. For the first time in 75 years, the United Nations will officially commemorate the Palestinian Nakba. The Nakba, or catastrophe, marks the foundation of the State of Israel in 1948, after forcing hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their homes. The Palestinian exodus came during the 1948 war that followed the UN's partition of British-mandated Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is headlining Monday's UN commemoration of the Nakba. Riyad Mansour, the Palestinian UN ambassador, called the UN observance historic and significant because the General Assembly played a key role in the partition of Palestine. He added, the catastrophe to the Palestinian people is still ongoing. Palestinians still don't have an independent state and they don't have the right to return to their homes as called for in the General Assembly resolution adopted in December 1948. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, Israeli occupation forces killed a Palestinian man and wounded another. And in the occupied West Bank, raising the Palestinian death toll this year to 150 Palestinians. The Palestinian Health Ministry said Saleh Mohammed Sabra was killed by live bullets during an Israeli attack. The occupation army said it was conducting an operation there to prepare to demolish the house of a suspected attacker that killed 2 Israeli settlers in the area in February. The incident comes after the Egyptian-mediated ceasefire ended 5 days of Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. A top Chinese envoy will begin a tour of Ukraine, Russia and other European cities on Monday in a trip Beijing says is aimed at discussing a political settlement to the Ukraine crisis. Li Yu, China's special representative for Eurasian affairs and former ambassador to Russia, will also visit Poland, France, Germany on a multi-day trip, according to the Foreign Ministry, without providing a schedule. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said at a daily briefing that the visit is a testament to China's efforts towards promoting peace talks and fully demonstrates China's firm commitment to peace. He is the most senior Chinese official to visit Ukraine since Russia invaded in February 2022. The visit comes weeks after Chinese President Xi Jinping held a phone call with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky in late April, in the first talks between the two leaders since the war began. Turkey's main opposition party embarked on an emotional roller coaster as a seesawing vote count threatened to dash hopes of a first-round election victory over conservative President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The Anatolia State News Agency said Erdogan was winning with more than 53% of the votes at the time, with the secular opposition figurehead Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu languishing near 41%. Istanbul's opposition mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu urged Turks to disregard the official Anatolia figures and claim separate numbers held by Kılıçdaroğlu's Republican People's Party showed a different picture. Separate figures provided by pro-opposition news outlets in Ankara showed Erdogan and Kılıçdaroğlu in a dead heat. Most of the early ballots appear to have been counted in heavily pro-Erdogan districts of Turkey's northeast. Votes are still not fully counted, but most likely will lead to runoff elections. And earlier, President Tayyip Erdogan's opponent faces an uphill struggle to end his two-decade rule of Turkey in a runoff vote that took place on May 28th, after he performed better than predicted in the first round of voting on Sunday, but fell short of an outright majority. Turks woke on Monday to see support for Erdogan just below the 50% threshold needed to avoid sending the NATO member country to a second round of presidential elections viewed as passing judgment on his autocratic rule. Pre-election opinion polls that suggested Erdogan risked a first national election defeat to his main challenger's disparate six-party alliance, and a vote seen as the most important in Turkey. Joining us over the phone to tell us more about the Turkish elections is Ambassador Hamdi Saleh, the former assistant to the foreign minister. Good afternoon to you, rather good evening to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Hi. Okay.
Sir, what do you think of the Turkish elections? It was so close between Erdogan and his opposition running mate. Why do you think it was so close, and why do you think that we're going to see a runoff?
First, let me emphasize that the election, this particular election, showed to what extent the Turkish nation is divided. It is so divided, like 50-50.
Yes.
And as a result of that, there is no what you call a reconciliation. Mm-hmm. The reason is that Mr. Erdogan is pushing in a particular direction.
Yes.
With emphasizing the Islamic character of Turkey, and connecting with Russia and with Iran and China and so on, and not really paying enough attention to his relations with the West. Also, he had for a long time problems with the entire Arab countries.
Yes.
He interfered in Syria and Iraq and Libya and so on. And the opposition kept talking that you are losing the friendship of one of the most important nations to us, Egypt.
Yes.
And there was so many, talking about that. In the last few months, maybe in the last 8 months or so, there was an approach from Turkey to try to, remedy the relationship with the Arab countries and so on. However, the foreign policy of Turkey was a little bit, ambiguous, and as a result of that, the opposition were able to capture the attention of the public. Now, what will happen? Why we are having that division? It was a very, indicative that, just before the day of the election, before what you call the silence, Mr. Erdogan went to Hagia Sophia, the mosque, and prayed there. Whereas Mr. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu went to the tomb of Kemal Atatürk, which is, emphasizing the secular character of Turkey. So in a sense, this is not a divide just for political, it shows political.
It's ideological.
It is more ideological. It is more about the orientation of Turkey as a whole.
Yes. So,
now,
sir, do you think that the reason why Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu is running so high when it comes to the vote numbers is because maybe some Turks are more interested in reaching their dream of joining the European Union?
No, I mean, in general, there was a very widespread feeling that Turkey needs change.
Yes.
And that was really why the opposition group, they brought six parties together and they formed this front.
Yes.
Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, maybe he's not a very charismatic among them, but at least he represents that line.
Yes.
So the issue is not really, one issue or so. It's several issues. Yeah, I mean, even during the earthquake, there was criticism of the fact that the government did not move enough and not enough efficiently to be able to remedy the situation. Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to emphasize is that the country is divided, heavily divided. And now we are looking into another 2 weeks of campaigning.
Yes.
I don't know if that will change the picture that much. But even if Mr. Erdogan wins, and that's what most of the analysts think,
yes,
it is like a winning only with a very slim majority. Yes. And that means that he still has to deal with the other half of the nation who is not really very much happy with the implementation of his policies and so on.
Yes. Mr. Ambassador, given that if Recep Tayyip Erdogan wins the elections itself, obviously most likely that his policies will continue as is. But if Kılıçdaroğlu wins, how do you see the shift happening when it comes to foreign policy for Turkey?
Well, there was a big division among the opposition and Mr. Erdogan about 9 or 10 months ago when they were telling him you are losing the entire Arab nations, particularly Egypt and so on. He corrected that and he moved to establish better relations with the Arab countries, particularly with Egypt. But he has some tension between him and the West, particularly the United States and France, and also, of course, Greece, his neighbor. Yes. So, in general, the policy which he was taking was not really an easy to implement. He was very concerned about the gas deposits in the Eastern Mediterranean. He interfered in Libya, he interfered in Syria, he interfered in Iraq. He was really moving too far with using the military muscles.
Yes.
And if there is a change in the administration, well, I don't think that will happen. They will emphasize more the policies which he did to correct himself, to rebuild the relations with the Arab countries, to rebuild the relations with other neighbors and so on. That will happen. Maybe they will improve a little bit the relations with the West, particularly the United States and France and the European Union.
Yes.
But in general, I think the foreign policy of Turkey, whether Mr. Erdogan wins, which is very much predictable, or his opposition, which I think it will be difficult. Yes. I think the articulation of the foreign policy of Turkey will continue along the last 10 months, what they were trying to proceed with in the last 10 months.
But on the international arena, we see that one of the sticking points for Turkish foreign policy is relations with China, for instance, and Russia and so forth. Do you think that there will be change within this if Erdogan doesn't take office?
Yeah, in both cases, whether Erdogan wins or Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu wins, there would be change of policy because there was so much criticism about really being so much close to Russia and to China, and neglecting the relationship with Europe and the United States. And there was criticism also of his handling his relationship with the Arab countries. So whatever happens, they will continue to correct their policies and to have a better policy, which will make Turkey again on good terms with most of its neighbors. Because at certain points, maybe 2 years ago, when I was talking in your particular program, I looked around and I said that Turkey was really having a lot of tension with all the neighbors, even in the north, with Armenia, with Kazakhstan. It was really a very difficult time. He worked very hard to correct that, and really, they moved step by step to improve relations with their neighbors in the east and the south and so on. But they need to emphasize this particular policy of being more positive and more cooperative with the regional countries which they are bordering with.
What about internally? What kind of policies could we see a shift in, even if it's Erdogan that wins or Kildikar? Either way, there must be some sort of shift because the race was so close, like you were saying. There's a division within the Turkish society. Do you see a change of policy within Turkey itself?
Definitely, there will be a change of policy within Turkey itself. But as I said, this is not predictable to have an opposition winning. But if they win, they will have a lot of changes in domestic policies.
And what about Erdogan? I'm sure he's going to also try to change things, seeing that he has lost some ground when it comes to his political base.
Who lost some ground?
Erdogan.
Or Erdogan?
Yes.
Well, not really. We have what you call the balancing vote, which has been won by Mr. What's his name, Mason or whatever, Sinan.
Yes.
So he has about 5.7% percent. This will be tipping the balance, and they are the nationalists and they more committed to the nationalist ideas and so on.
Yes.
And that's more closer to Erdogan, not to the opposition.
Yes.
However, things are not really very clear. The domestic politics is very fluid, and I think it will take a couple of weeks to really articulate each party to articulate its own policy.
Okay, Ambassador Hamdi Saleh, the former assistant to the foreign minister, thank you so much for joining us over the phone. We're going to take a short break and move on with the rest of the episode. Moving to business and financial news, the U.S. President Joe Biden and Republican leaders are set to reconvene today for crunch talks on raising U.S. borrowing limits with a possible debt default now just weeks away. The Treasury has warned of catastrophic economic consequences if the U.S. runs out of cash to pay its bills, which would leave it unable to pay federal workers and trigger a likely surge in interest rates with knock-on effects for businesses and mortgage holders across the country and financial markets around the world. Fresh data reinforces the prospect of default potentially as early as June 1st, according to Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who warned on Monday in a letter to House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. The two parties remain sharply divided on the issue, with Republicans insisting Biden agreed to significant spending cuts in exchange for their support to raise the debt ceiling. UK unemployment rose further in the 3 months to the end of March, official data showed, as elevated inflation weighs on job markets. The rate increased to 3.9% from 3.8% in the 3 months to the end of February, according to the National Office for Statistics. Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt said in reaction, it's encouraging that the unemployment rate remains historically low, but difficulty in finding staff and rising prices are a worry for many families and business. That's why officials must stick to the plan to halve inflation and help families with the cost of living while delivering reforms and supporting the elderly and disabled. That's why they had to stick to their plan to halve the inflation. And they also added that the UK annual inflation remains stubbornly high, above 10%, as soaring food prices offset falling energy. Over to neighboring France, President Emmanuel Macron met businessmen on Monday to discuss future investment projects as the French leader hosts a conference aimed at persuading business leaders to put their money in France. They met at the Élysée Palace before heading to Versailles for the latest edition of the President's Choose France conference, where Macron seeks to drum up investments in the country. Finance Minister Bruno Le Maire said that negotiations are ongoing with the magnate. Le Maire gave no details of Monday's talks with Elon Musk, saying simply that all of the investments are a fruit of months or even years of negotiations. Russia's oil exports rose in April to the highest level since its invasion of Ukraine, boosting revenues by $1.7 billion despite Western sanctions. The International Energy Agency said Tuesday that Russian exports increased by 50,000 barrels per day to 8.3 million barrels per day last month, estimating that the country did not fully deliver on threats to cut production sharply. The country's oil export revenues rose by $1.7 billion to $15 billion in April. Russia's tax receipts from its oil and gas sector were down by 64% year-on-year. The group of 7 wealthy nations and Australia have set price caps on Russian petroleum products and crude in coordination with the European Union in an effort to cut key source of funding for its war in Ukraine. The EU has also imposed embargoes on the country's key oil exports. In response, Russia has threatened to cut off countries and companies that comply with the price cap. Moving to technology, Elon Musk's SpaceX has tapped NASA's former human spaceflight boss, Kathy Lueders, to help oversee development of the company's Moon and Mars rockets called Starship. Here's the story.
Elon Musk's SpaceX has tapped NASA's former human spaceflight boss, Kathy Lueders, to help oversee development of the company's Moon and Mars rocket called Starship. Lueders, the second former NASA human spaceflight chief to retire and move to SpaceX in recent years, represents another key hire for the company as it races to develop and use Starship for landing NASA astronauts on the Moon within the next decade. Lueders spent 31 years at NASA and retired in April. In 2021, she was the NASA source selection official who picked SpaceX's Starship rocket for a $3 billion Artemis contract to land the first U.S. astronauts on the Moon since 1972. Private moon landers from other companies are to be picked in a later contract program. Lueders was among a group of officials credited with leading the U.S. Space Agency's shift to public-private contracting models, a cost-saving approach under which NASA helps fund development of private spacecraft and purchases rides for astronauts as a service instead of managing the spacecraft as the spacecraft owner. As the head of NASA's human spaceflight wing, Lueders oversaw development of SpaceX's Crew Dragon, the company's flagship cargo and astronaut taxi that has become the agency's primary ride to and from the International Space Station.
In the world of the arts, the films competing at the Cannes Film Festival and returns from May 16th to the 27th, bringing a huge number of stars and celebrated filmmakers to France's Côte d'Azur. The 21 films competing for the top prize, Palme d'Or, as well as selections of other movies premiering out of competition. Here's the story.
The Cannes red carpet springs to life again Tuesday as the 76th Cannes Film Festival gets underway with the premiere of Louis Cannes' period drama John du Barry with Johnny Depp. This year's festival promises a Côte d'Azur buffet of spectacle, scandal, and cinema set to be served over the next 12 days. It's unspooling against the backdrop of labor unrest, protests that have roiled France in recent months over changes to its pension system are planned to run during the festival and at a distance from the festival's main hub. But with a festival lined with some much anticipated big budget films, including James McDonald's Indiana Jones and the Dial of the Destiny and Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon, the party is sure to go on regardless. Stars set to hit Cannes' red carpet in the next week and a half include Natalie Portman, Leonardo DiCaprio, Kate Blanchett, Sean Penn, Alicia Vikander, and Weeknd and Scarlett Johansson. The festivities Tuesday will include an opening ceremony where Michael Douglas is to receive an honorary Palme d'Or. The jury that will decide the festival's top prize, the Palme d'Or, will also be introduced. This year, the jury is led by Swedish filmmaker Ruben Stalin and two-time Palme winner who last year won for the social satire The Triangle of Sadness. It's Depp's first new film since his trial last year with Amber Heard, his ex-wife. After both Depp and Heard accused each other of physical and verbal abuse, a civil jury awarded Depp $10 million in damages and $2 million to Heard. In remarks to the press Monday, Cannes director Thierry Frémaux defended the choice, saying Depp is extraordinary in the film and he paid no attention to the trial.
With the end of the first half of the Inter Milan and AC Milan match in the Champions League, which ended at 0-0 draw, we're going to give you some background information where Romelu Lukaku's return to sparkling form has given Inter Milan an extra weapon ahead of today's Champions League semi-final decider with AC Milan. Out for much of the season with injuries and with a damaged reputation following a disastrous World Cup, Lukaku has slowly worked his way back to his best. The Belgium striker has scored 5 times and set up 3 more in the last 6 matches, and his double in Saturday's 4-2 win over Sassuolo highlighted his newfounded confidence. Lukaku celebrated his 30th birthday by beginning and ending the scoring at the San Siro, spinning and lashing home the opener from the edge of the box shortly before half-time and drilling in his 8th league goal of the season just before the end. Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp urged his team to keep the pressure on their Premier League rivals in the last 2 games of the season as they make a late charge for a top 4 finish. Liverpool secured Europa League football for next season after Monday's 3-0 win at Leicester City and sit 1 point behind 4th-placed Manchester United and 3rd-placed Newcastle United. Both teams have a game in hand each. Klopp, whose side are now on a 7-game winning streak, said 6 weeks ago he had doubts about their chances of playing in Europe next season. Liverpool host Aston Villa on Saturday before a trip for their final match to Southampton, whose relegation has been confirmed. Carlos Alcaraz said he needed a few days to reset his mind ahead of the French Open after being dragged out of his comfort zone and stunned by Hungarian qualifier Fabian Marzon at the Italian Open. Carlos Alcaraz crashed to a humbling 6-3, 7-6 defeat by the Hungarian in the 3rd round of the Italian Open, as his quest for the 3rd straight title on clay before the French Open ended in disappointment. The 20-year-old had come into the tournament on the back of triumphs in Barcelona and Madrid and will replace Novak Djokovic as the world #1 for top billing at Roland Garros, which begin later this month. But Alcaraz was far from his best and got off to a shaky start in his 2nd match in Rome, dropping serve to love in the 4th game, as world number 135 Marzan built a big lead and dominated the late exchanges to easily win the opening set. Marzan continued to heap pressure on Alcaraz and broke for a 4-3 lead after the Spaniard saved 3 break points earlier in the 2nd set, but the 23-year-old Budapest native immediately let his opponent off the hook before forcing a tiebreak. Alcaraz rests to a 4-1 lead while Marzan hit back in superb style to reel off 6 points and hand the world #2 only his 2nd defeat on clay in 22 matches this season. It was the first defeat for Alcaraz to a player ranked outside the world's top 100 since 2021 Paris Masters, when he fell to Hugo Gaston. World #3 Daniel Medvedev earned a hard-fought 3-6, 6-1, 6-3 win over Spain's Bernabe Zapata Miralles to reach the last 16 in Rome. In the women's draw, Elena Rybakina saw off Marketa Vostoova 6-3, 6-3 to reach the first clay court WTA 1000 quarterfinal, where she will face either top-ranked Iga Swiatek, the twice defending champion, or Croatia's Donna Vekic. This brings us to the end of the sports news of Nile TV Newsroom Live and this edition of Nile TV Newsroom Live. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more here on Nile TV.